All right, well, we don't have to tell you this. It's been a busy week in Washington once again. Here to help us take a look at the weekend review, Republican strategist James Norton, who's here in studio with us, and Democratic strategist Isaac Wright, who's here via Skype.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Good to have you.
Isaac, I think we're going to see you here in just a second.
Yeah, we're waiting for you to show up.
We can hear you.
It's the disembodied voice of Isaac Wright, but as we wait to get Isaac going on, there he is. Start with you, James. Good to see you. We have you in studio with us tonight. So this week, the big story, I think, now comes out, what we saw today in London. The president's reaction. What did you think about that today?
You know, obviously, these type of simplistic terror attacks have become the new normal. We have to be, continue to be ever vigilant. It's not going to go away anytime soon. It's obviously been 6 weeks and a lot's happened, so it's gone out of the news a little bit. But the reality is the threat is still there, and it's very real, just as much in London as it is here at home.
Now, I don't know if you heard. I mean, his reaction, certainly we heard that. British Prime Minister Theresa May was like, hey, we need to pull back a little bit because what he tweeted out, they were like, how do you know this information that happened so far? So, and I wonder if this is just his lack of experience as a world leader. Do you think this causes problems sometimes because he is so Twitter happy?
Well, we did see the Brits weren't very happy after the Ariana Grande concert, and there was an issue of intelligence sharing and leaks coming from the U.S. side, or supposed leaks. So we know that British intelligence was not happy with that, and so assuming that the president was briefed, immediately after, and that there may have been some information there, and how it gets portrayed in the media. But I also think that we also have to be careful in terms of, how do we respond to this? Internet access and these type of things are things that have been talked about for quite a while. But for the most part, the population is still moving forward and doing its thing. So,
Isaac, anything to add on this?
This is the time when we need deliberate and intentional leadership, and President Trump continues to fly off the handle on social media. This is a problem we've seen before, and it continues.
All right, let me ask you, let's move on to another subject real quick. Let's talk about DACA. We've heard a lot of back and forth this week from the president reaching across the bow to Democrats saying, he's going to work on this. And then we heard something different from the White House and then something different from the Democrats. Moving forward, do you really think that the president is going to continue to work with Democrats to get this deal done?
We can only hope so. Look, for 9 months, the Trump administration has had nothing but failures working with Ryan and McConnell on the Hill. Despite Republicans controlling the House, the Senate, and the White House, they're yet to do anything. Now, some of us are thankful for that, considering the bad ideas they've proposed. But hopefully, by working with Democrats, President Trump will not only have better ideas, but better outcomes to actually implement.
You laughed a little bit there for a moment.
Well, I think that, there's always nice to have a little bit of dramatics here when it comes to talking about politics. I think all new presidents have trouble when they come into office. I think President Bush had trouble. I think President Obama did. Certainly President Clinton had trouble trying to pass health care when he first started. I think that they all eventually learn about, working deals across the aisle. We all look for the Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, kind of partnership, having a beer and working things out. I think that's something we all kind of work towards. I think on DACA, the reality is there'll probably be some sort of temporary relief bill, I think, buying a few years for some of these folks and trying to figure out the longer-term solution. But I think overall, immigration reform has been an issue for the far left and the far right in terms of, extreme views and needing to come into the middle and find some sort of
providing a safe space for 800,000 people who have been raised in this country, in many instances only know English. This is the only home they've ever known. They were brought here as children without a decision of their own. That's not dramatics. That's just basic common sense.
Well, I'm not really talking about DACA per se. DACA is a singular issue. What I'm talking about is immigration reform, comprehensive immigration reform in the entire system, it needing to be cleaned up and finding a way for it to work for not only people that are here, but people who want to enter the country. So it's really having a calm conversation about that issue.
Bankrupting our country to build a wall is neither a calm nor a common sense discussion.
Well, we can continue this one forever too. Yeah. Let me ask you guys about another point with the president reaching out to Democrats. Certainly we've talked about tax reform. He has not been able to get any major legislation passed despite the GOP being in control of both houses of Congress. And now we see him reaching out. Do you think it could have a negative impact on the base or the GOP? Because we've heard a lot of pushback. James?
I think that President Trump's base is actually a big mix, and I think there's a perception that it's a far-right base, but the reality is he got reelected on his economic message. He got reelected by independents and Democrats in Michigan and Pennsylvania, and that's really what carried him over on economics. And I think that, he obviously had a message on the wall, and and what he wanted to do there. But I think ultimately it came through with a different coalition.
Now, let's talk about the wall, and we're going to go back to immigration for a moment here, because we're talking about wall. You know, he said the wall, and let's be honest, he said on the campaign trail, it wasn't his base that said it. He was saying Mexico is going to pay for this, and then he's saying, well, they're going to reimburse us, and now they're talking about getting the funding, and there are people out there who voted for him, and I talked to one last night on the 11:30 show, where they said, look, that was why I voted for him. And now we're hearing so many different messages. Is the messaging a big issue here?
You know, I think that Washington is a process, and new presidents certainly can become frustrated with that process. And I think that, you know, for President Trump, you know, part of his message was to make Washington go. And I think that he hasn't made Washington go yet in terms of the way he wanted to in his style. And it's very hard to just demand from the behind the desk to say go do, because that's not how the legislative process works. And so I think that he does have an issue in terms of trying to do something, you know, with that particular campaign promise. But at the same time, I think, you know, that while the wall itself might be controversial, I think border security is something that most people agree, and they do want to find some sort of protective process there.
Isaac, let me bring you in.
Let's look at that. Yeah, let's look at that comparison of his flip-flops on the wall to his flip-flops on taxes, since we talked about taxes too. President Trump sent his Treasury Secretary out in November to an interview to say that their tax cuts would not go to the wealthiest 1% of Americans, but would benefit the other 99%. Then he had him walk that back before testimony before Congress. In April, President Trump proposed a plan that would give 40% of the benefits of tax reform to the top 1% of Americans. Then this week, thankfully, he backtracked on that and said it wouldn't be to the benefit of the 1%, but it would benefit the other 99% of us. It's just hard to know what he means on any given day, because it seems to change from day to day.
Let me also ask you your opinion. We gotta bring up North Korea here. You know, they tested another missile yesterday. How do you think the president, or what grade would you give the president on his response to the situation with North Korea?
Right now, we need calm diplomacy. We are literally talking about nuclear warfare and worldwide consequences. This is the time when the president should be in diplomacy mode. He should be bringing in allies, working in conjunction with allies, not spouting off on social media against a dictator.
You get the last word, James.
You know, he's actually the 13th president now to deal with North Korea since the treaty was signed in the 1950s. And so, you know, I think this is an issue that hasn't gone away. I think that President Trump has brought in the Japanese premier. He's met with Abe several times. He's obviously met with the Chinese leader several times. You know, there's military exercises joint, you know, in the region. But I think this is also a hermit society and a hermit leadership that we actually don't know a lot about. So I think it's a very challenging thing. We all hope for a peaceful, diplomatic solution here, but it's a challenge for any president.
Yeah, absolutely.
James Norton, Isaac Wright, thank you both so much for joining us. Happy Friday, guys. It's the weekend.